Here.
Board Member Stubblefield.
Here. Okay, tonight we're going to be hearing a petition. This is, where's the number? Oh, okay, yeah. 866. This is a request for a short variance. California Resources Corporation. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Production Corporation, located at South Mountain and West Mountain leases.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Will the petitioners, are you the petitioner's representatives tonight?
Yes.
Please state your names for the record.
Bruce Carter with California Resources Corporation.
And your title?
My title is Senior Regulatory Advisor.
Thank you.
Jeff Nobriga, California Resources Corporation, Environmental Specialist.
Thanks very much. Would you like to present your petition?
Yes, we would. I have a few slides here. I just want to give a little bit of a background about our company and why we're here and the requests that we're making. So, again, my name is Bruce Carter. I'm with California Resources Corporation. In the petition, it says California Resources Production Corporation, which is a subsidiary. That's our Ventura arm. So essentially, CRC, California Resources Corporation, and California Resources Production Corporation are essentially the same for the purposes of this action. Just wanted to reiterate what our company stands for. Character, responsibility, and commitment are key to our organization, and those are the tenets that we follow. We act with integrity and honor without exception as a new company. We achieve California's highest standards for safety and environmental protection, and we empower our workers and promote communities where we live and work. We formed as a corporation in December 1st of 2014. And that is the genesis, so we're a fairly new corporation. Who we are, we're an independent, publicly traded oil and natural gas exploration and production company focused exclusively in California. We explore for, produce, gather, process, and market crude oil, natural gas, and natural gas liquids. Our employees live, work, and raise their families in Ventura County and other counties throughout California, contributing to the community and also to the local economy. California Resources Production Corporation's South Mountain lease operates under the Ventura Air Pollution Control District's permit to operate number 53. We have a condition, number 3, that states that all crude oil production for sale shall leave the facility by pipeline. California Resources Corporation prefers pipeline as the most environmentally friendly and safest mode of transport, and we're committed to resuming pipeline transport as soon as Crimson's pipeline becomes available. Currently, we are here for you to get a short variance based on the pipeline that we ship into from our South Mountain leases has been down for preventative maintenance, and we don't have the exact timeline when Crimson's pipeline will be back up. We're not representative of Crimson. We just know that they're not back up and running yet, and we don't have an exact day when they're going to be back up and running. That day will be back into the pipeline. I just want to give a brief timeline of what has occurred over the past month and a half. We've had several prior emergency variances that have been tailored to exactly what has happened with the Crimson pipeline. So we didn't want to be in this thing, but we had to take action. So the first was on July 16th of 2016. Crimson had ceased the operation of their shipping line which we use to transport a portion of the South Mountain lease oil production. An estimated 1,000 barrels a day were potentially impacted by shut-in of that pipeline. Several days later, we have petitioned and received an emergency variance with the Air Pollution Control District from an emergency from the chair of this hearing board to temporarily load oil out of our affected facilities, and that was the first emergency variance, number 863. On August 2nd, several weeks later, we filed a short variance petition to continue the temporary oil loading at that South Mountain facility because the emergency variance is only good for 30 days, and there was the potential that we would be beyond that 30 days, and we had a noticing requirement in order to make the short variance hearing, so we had filed that. On August 5th of 2016, Crimson had shut down the remaining pipelines servicing the South Mountain leases. That time, we had an estimated 2,000 barrels a day production that were potentially impacted by shut-in of the pipelines. A couple days later, on August 9th, 2016, CRC received an emergency variance from APCD to temporarily load oil out of the additional facilities. That was variance number 865, and as a result, the short variance number 864 was withdrawn because short variance 864 did not include the additional production on South Mountain that was affected by that variance. Therefore, we needed a new variance that covered the leases that were affected at that time. On August 15th, CRC filed this short variance petition to continue the temporary oil loading at our South Mountain leases. And the variance, the short variance before you today is number 866. And we are requesting to continue the existing emergency variance of up to 20 trucks per day, and that would be only and until the Crimson pipeline becomes available, and we would be able to ship back into the Crimson pipeline and keep everything in the pipeline at that point. At this point, we have several temporary loading facilities at the several leases, and we have a graphic. I'm not sure. I don't think the graphic's in here. Yeah, we have a graphic here. I don't have a laser pointer, but this is a good point to see the affected leases. So if you look in the upper left portion under the interlease trucking route, you'll see Highway 126, and then below that is the Santa Paula River, or Santa Clara River, I'm sorry. And then below that, you'll see the leases that have been affected. Those are along Lemon Company Road. That's Norcop B, TU Norcop, TU High Richardson B, the TU Hyde Pinkerton lease, the TU Stein lease, the TU Taylor lease, the Richardson Ranch B lease, the Harvey lease, Santa Paula Fee, and South Mountain in Ojai, where we truck the facility and it is able to enter an existing other Crimson pipeline at that point. The two other leases that are mentioned are the Mark Richardson and Stewart and the Colbert lease.
All these leases that you're seeing here were captured under the emergency variance at the time when all of the pipelines were down. Currently today, not all the pipelines are down. So we've got about 9 leases currently affected versus the 12. So we would have the capability currently to do interlease transferring from the affected leases up into a lease, which would be South Mountain Ojai, where the pipeline is back in service. So what you're seeing with the red would be the proposed trucking route for the interlease transferring of product.
And I believe the longest route is, what do we say, 6 miles?
So 3 miles on county roads, which would be Lemon Road and South Mountain Road, And the longest distance would be 6 miles total. So 3 on county and 3 on private, essentially.
As for compliance with the emergency variance, during the oil loading, we are following the existing APCD rule. 71.3 requires transfer of reactive organic compound liquids, ROCs, has been adhered to. We're employing bottom loading procedures that have been utilized to control for odors and additional vapors. The emissions from the loading operation are controlled by routing the truck vapor return line back into the storage tank, and the tanks are currently under vapor recovery, which has 90% control efficiency in according with the rule. Secondary containment has also been constructed and utilized during the loading and unloading. We have spill kits placed at loading and unloading areas as a precaution. We also have, excuse me, verbal communications via radio has been used to ensure efficient and safe operation of crude oil transportation. CRC operator supervision has also been present to oversee the loading process, and once a week we comply with APCD rules for fugitive emission inspections performed weekly to verify temporary crude oil loading facilities are operating in leak-free condition. So all those mitigation factors are employed and incorporated into our existing emergency variants as they were required as conditions, and we have been complying with them. One bullet point that we don't have is we produce a weekly report of all the trucking, named the amount of trucks that we have had, the amount of crude that has been transported, and in order to track the emissions long term. And that concludes our petition, and our request is that you support staff's recommendation for the draft and make it final, the short variance that is here before you tonight. That concludes my presentation, and we are open to questions from your board.
Members of the board, any questions?
The statement is made that now from the SMO facility, Crimson pipeline is open now from that facility.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you look at the draft of the short variance order on page number 5, at the lower part of that is now all irrelevant, correct? Because you won't be, everything will now be going to South Mountain, Ojai?
Correct. However, we would like to reserve the existing variance as written, as we don't have control over what Crimson is going to do. And as I went through the timeline, you could see over the course of a month and a half, different lines were affected at different times. So with this short variance, that would allow us for some flexibility should they in turn shut down another line. We do not know, we don't have control over what Crimson would do, but we do want to maintain the flexibility. Thank you.
Where, on this picture right here, where is the 3 miles of public road that you would be using? Is that all South Mountain Road?
No, it would be Lemon Road. See where Norcop B is?
Okay.
It's along that red line, and then you've got South Mountain Road.
Okay,
Which
so
is up to
from
the
Norcop B to the intersection right above Santa Paula Fee, that would be the 3 miles?
You have a pointer?
Yeah, I was just looking.
Yeah.
You can just go up and.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from this point to this point.
It's 3 miles.
Correct.
And the rest is private lease road.
Correct.
How long before Crimson did their initial shutdown were you informed by Crimson that they were going to do that?
It was rather quick. We did not have that much notice. I would have to go back and check our records, but it was within a day or less.
Oh, okay. Very
It was not it was not much notice.
Was there something that occurred?
We don't know.
They really haven't
they
been
had
very
one-
communicative to you?
No, they had one day in there, and I forgot which day it was, where the entire company chose a safety sand down, and they met with all their staff. That one day, they shut absolutely everything in for a couple hours.
How long has that pipeline been in place?
I don't know if we
I
can
d-
answer that. It's quite some time, I believe.
Yeah, we don't have the exact age of that pipeline.
Well, is this
yeah.
the first maintenance you're aware of in that pipeline?
I don't know what they're, I'd be hesitant to comment on anything that's related to Crimson's pipeline, as we do not know. We're not directly,
Well, you've utilized it for, how long have you utilized Crimson Pipeline?
correct. Well, the production has been in that pipeline, our production and our predecessor company has been in that pipeline for, gosh, what do you,
Quite a while.
yeah, quite a while.
Quite a while.
It's been a
Tell
while.
me, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long? Give me a better estimate than quite a while.
More than 10 years.
Yeah.
Probably
10
easily more than 10 years.
Okay, and
Maybe
this
more.
is the first shutdown that you're aware of that pipeline?
I've only been with the company for 2.5+ years, so,
That, the two of you,
right,
Are you-
that
This
we
is
are,
the
that
first-
Really
we
new.
are aware.
This is the first since in the last 2 years since we've been here, correct? And we don't get records of any of, that's their company, they're internal, they're regulated, so in terms of, the question on their pipelines, they're doing preventative maintenance, and that's a really good thing, and they're making sure that nothing else happens.
okay, understanding you have no control over them, have they given you a guesstimate? Of course, you aren't responsible for any guesstimates, but have they given you a guesstimate?
I think we would be back in there tonight if they were to reopen that pipeline. We started out with the timeline, and when we initially came in for the first emergency variance, we did not think we were going to use that entire 30 days. We thought it was going to be maybe a week or two, and here we are, and now we're a month and a half into this, and we're hoping that it's any day now, but we don't have an exact estimate from Crimson Pipeline.
Yeah. Have you, I would assume though, somebody.
We've been trying to get that. We've been trying to get that, yeah.
And has Crimson given you any indication?
I don't have any indication of when they're going to be back into this pipeline. Those are questions for another company that, we're not able to answer because of the information.
Looking at page 7.
Page 7 of
and 8
the,
of the draft variance order. Looking at the last sentence on page 7. How were these numbers arrived at? The 164 barrels,
sure.
the 2, the 1.0115?
Do you want to cover that?
The district comes up with a number of .0115 pounds per barrel as an emission factor, and so you figure out how much oil you're loading.
So I need to ask them how they got that.
Correct.
Yeah. How about the 164 barrels an hour? How do you figure that?
That is the pump rate that the pump would do to produce.
And that's how much?
Into the
if
truck.
That's consistently day after day after day, it's 164?
Yeah, this would be, as a worst-case scenario if it were to be pumping.
Okay. And the times 2, what's the times 2 for?
Well, I believe it's a 165-barrel truck, and we would be allowed to load no more than 2 at a time, and no more than 20 in one day.
Okay, but you're multiplying the 20 later on.
So the 2 would be, we can load up to 2 trucks per time.
Okay, but if,
So on the next page, I think that helps.
I can understand the first 2 lines on page 8. That's very simple. It's just like, it seems that I was having a hard time correlating the last line, the paragraph number 1 with that paragraph number 2. There just seems to be a disconnect there for me.
Yeah, the 164 is per hour, is how many barrels can be loaded per hour, times 2 trucks, times the emission factor of pounds per barrel, essentially.
But really, what we're looking at, we're giving you permission for 2,000 barrels per day, 20 trucks, et cetera. So really, what we should be looking at is actually paragraph 2. That's the one that really makes a difference. Because that's what we're giving you permission for.
Yeah.
Right, I would believe so. I just want to get concurrence from Mr. Searcy, possibly.
I'm not sure if this works. We would calculate the worst-case scenario for truck loading in pounds per hour. And then we do a total for the for the worst-case scenario for the total number of barrels that are loaded. And so there is a on the order they are allowed to load up to 2 trucks at the same time. So that's the reason why it's times 2. 0.0115 pounds per barrel of oil is a factor that our folks use for whenever somebody permits one of these loading facilities.
I have nothing further at this time.
I have a few comments and questions. You have a copy of the draft order.
Yes.
Yes, right here.
A number of places in the order, we're talking about transferring oil to someone else to truck and sell. Does that happen at the loading facility? For example, on page 1, in the bottom paragraph, it talks about or transfer oil to another party, about 3 lines down. Does that happen at one of these loading facilities?
Not normally.
Is that what you're asking?
We did truck to a refinery, certain quantity of barrels, but now that the pipelines are back in service, we intend to go back into those pipelines that are active.
So, are you asking for a variance that allows you to transfer custody of the oil to another party or not?
With oil and gas, we're an oil and gas production company. And when we're done producing, it goes through a lease area custody transfer device. At that point, that transfers the custody of the oil. Primarily, the custody transfer for this operation is into the SMO, but ordinarily in a trucking rack, your LACT unit, which is what is referred to the lease area custody transfer, occurs at that point where it goes into, it changes custody at that point, just similar to a pipeline, because we don't own the oil from when we pump it out of the ground to truck it to a pipeline, and the pipeline goes to the refinery. There's custody that transfer that occurs along that. And we're an E&P company, exploration and production. So we typically transfer at the transportation. And that transportation in this case is into the SMO, the South Mountain and Ojai pipeline that Crimson has there. Typically, if we had another loading rack, the sale point would be at that LACT unit.
But all of this pumping into trucks that we're talking about here, does that amount to a transfer of ownership, at least some cases?
In some cases, yes.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yes.
Sorry.
And that happens at the loading facility?
Correct.
But in some cases, you either your trucks or a contractor trucks, you take it from one place to another and put it in your
Correct.
transfer? Okay.
It's very tight monitoring of the metering because there's a lot of royalties and state royalties and others.
Moving on to page 2, talking about the subject equipment consists of 13 temporary crude oil loading facilities. Do these facilities currently exist? All of them?
We did not construct loading facilities at each facility. We wanted the capability to, in the event that our tanks were getting at capacity that we were going to need to truck. But we have, we were requesting for up to 13 facilities at 12 locations, yes.
At the bottom of page 2, it says, very last sentence, 3 leases have truck loading facilities and are permitted to ship oil by truck.
That's correct.
Do you know whether the ROCs that are released by that operation are covered in your permit?
Yes, they are.
They are.
Yes, those are permitted, already permitted facilities,
But-
those 3.
But the ROC release is something that's quantified and included in the
Yes,
permit?
those are captured.
Because at a number of places in here, you talk about that this part of your permit that you're violating says that you can't truck.
Correct, except for those 3 facilities.
Okay.
Everything else must leave via pipeline.
Like Mr. Murphy, I'd like a little better, if you can possibly give me a timeline of your correspondence with Crimson, between Crimson and TRC, CPC.
I'm sorry, I can't give you an exact timeline on when Crimson will be back online. They have not told us when they will be back online.
For the second shutdown, did you get any more notification than you did for the first one?
No.
Not much, no.
And very little when they did their safety
Day or
stand
two.
down. Maybe, again, the day we found out circuitous route when they did the safety shutdown.
But is it, that just changed.
Is that better?
No,
Okay.
I was wondering where.
You want me to go back?
It sounds like some of these, at least one of these pipelines that you talk about in here has come back online.
Correct.
Okay. But you still want to leave it as in the variance in case it goes offline?
In the event further studies get done on that line, yes. Our preference is to ship everything via pipeline. There's no benefit for us to truck oil out of these leases.
Understand.
It's very costly for us. So we would obviously prefer to get into a pipeline as fast as possible and cease trucking operation.
On page 6, this was one of the things I was referring to, this quote out of the permit, all crude oil production for sale shall leave the facility via pipeline, ... You're saying that the ... is where it says except for these 3
Correct.
facilities where you're allowed to truck?
Correct. That is what our petition for the emergency variance and the short variance is from, that condition number 3.
The ... goes on to say this condition does not apply to the oil loading facilities at the blank lease, at the blank lease and the blank lease.
Okay. When you are loading a truck, when the truck is, did you say it's inside a berm somewhere in here?
Yes.
It's in-
We've constructed.
How long does it take to load a truck?
I don't know.
Approximately an hour.
Do the trucks idle or turn off during that period?
I believe they're turned off during that period. We aren't using the pumps from the trucks.
Is, under, also on page 8, under item 4, you said that curtailment is not feasible. Curtailment to me means cutting back some amount on your production, which a lot of the variances that we hear, petitions for variances, the producer is offering to not shut in anything, but to reduce their production so that reduce this situation.
We have reduced other affected smaller leases and curtailed those. However, if we curtail this production, we'd basically be shutting in the 2,000, excuse me, 2,000 barrels a day, and we don't have the tank storage capacity to do that on a long-term basis.
So it's either 2,000 barrels a day or nothing. There's no way to tune that down.
Well, we wouldn't be able to send any product off
Yeah.
for sales. There's no pipeline.
Some of our smaller production leases that are lower than that are already shut in.
Just this is for my own curiosity, but you're talking about using certified tanker trucks on page 9 under item 7.
Right, DOT certified,
That was my question. What agency does
DOT.
that? So it's a federal
Correct.
certification.
And the drivers are all DOT certified. They have to be.
And if we ask you to, in addition to the items here on page 9 and 10 that talk about what the petitioner shall do, if we ask you to minimize truck emissions on site, how would you do that?
Any more than we already are?
The truck emissions, not the ROC emissions. I'm talking about the emissions from the vehicular emissions.
While the truck is loading or while the truck is transporting?
While the truck is loading.
I think the truck's not running when we're loading, and we're loading from the tanks, and we're not using the truck's.
Okay, I'm going to request that we state that explicitly.
Okay. Can you do that? That's not on there, right?
That's all.
Okay, my background is civil engineering, so my questions are mainly about the roads and some of the changing from pipelines to trucks. On the roads, one question I have: do you have any bridges you have to go across?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
Because and also you have especially on the south side, you have a few hairpin curves that are pretty pronounced, and you're using those trucks that are, 165 gallons
No.
barrel?
We're permitted for up to 165 barrel truck. And to answer the question on going a bridge, we went over, there was a time, and we're no longer shipping to the refinery that you had requested that we had to go over a bridge. But mainly when we're on some of the other leases, we're using a smaller 120 or a 70-barrel vacuum truck for the reasons that you're bringing up.
Because those larger trucks, they weigh about 30 tons when they're fully loaded.
Right. Yeah.
So
they're not-
you're talking on
they're not utilized to go up.
quite a
the
load.
mountain.
So if you can cut it down to the smaller trucks, probably it's a better idea.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Well, the other thing is, just hearing previous speakers, and it seems that the lifeline of your operations depends on the Crimson pipeline. I mean, for having a company, you depend so much on it, it seems you haven't developed much of a rapport or close connection with it. I mean, it seems that the best thing would be if you buy them out, or at least go on Friday night and have a beer with them. Because there's no connections there. I mean, they say, well, we don't know when it's going to all be open. Well, we don't know what's. I mean, the way you talk is that maybe next month they say, well, we're going to shut you up again. I mean, that's why you're coming here for an emergency permit. There shouldn't be an emergency permit if it's only they're checking the pipeline to see if it's in operation. It should be a regular permit. Anyway, that's a question that is in my mind.
Sure, and I can appreciate that, and we're trying to develop as best as we can, but there was an incident that they had a month or so back that there are I understand there's some legal issues around that, so that may affect some of their communications.
Well, I hope you solve it up and go again. And then in the testing, you say you're going to be fugitive testing. I mean, it's kind of broad and open. Does the Air Pollution Control District have some limits of what they expect?
It is. We're following. I believe it's 7410. Yes. We're following the rules of Rules 7410, which requires testing, and we're going above and beyond, and we're testing that once a week for the emergency variance hearing.
Are you using ionized detector or anything like that?
Yeah, it's an OVA.
What?
OVA.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you require them to give you a certain amount that they should, numbers that they should have when they do your reports every Monday?
Yeah, Rule 7410 requires quarterly fugitive emission inspections, and throughout this process, we have required weekly inspections because of the fact that the loading facilities were not really permanent facilities. So we want to make sure that we're not having any leaks. And 7410 does have a couple of leak rate thresholds. We have anything over 1,000 ppm and under 10,000 is a minor leak, and anything over 10,000 would be a major leak. And so if they do find leaks, they do have a timeline where they need to repair the leaks.
And are you mainly concerned about benzene, or what bothers you?
Well, there is benzene in oil. I mean, that's a known fact. Our rules regulate for the criteria pollutants, and the main thing in oil would be basically ROCs, reactive organics, and those are one of the components that would make ozone. So yeah, we don't specifically regulate for benzene, but that is one of the components that's in oil.
And when it says the amount of rock that they be dumping in the 4-week period is going to be about at 1 ton. I don't have any point of comparison. I don't know if that's acceptable, or that's too much or too little, or you're happy with it. Or?
Well, we actually do support this order, and this question has come up in the past before when we have a number. The board is always needs to know, well, what does that number mean compared to everything else? And so what I did was got some emission factors from some folks that basically do nothing but emission work, and the worst case scenario from the oil loading for the trucks would be 1.035 tons over the 90-day period. That would be assuming the worst case, 90 days and 90 days at 2,000 barrels a day. And the total countywide emissions from all sources for that same 90-day period would be 9,683 tons. The total man-made emissions for that period would be 3,203 tons. So we're looking at 1 ton compared to 3,203 tons, basically.
So I think that's fine. I mean, it's better if you have any, but I mean, that's a number you can live with. Okay, thanks very much. I don't have any other questions.
Do any other members of the board have any further questions? Dan?
Going back to this right here, what are the three leases that you have the truck permits? I would assume Culbert, Mark Richardson, Stewart. What's the third one?
You mean the loading rack?
Yeah.
What are the ones that have the loading rack? The existing ones in our existing permit.
Yeah.
That's the question.
They're not on here because we don't need them for the emergency purpose. We already have loading capabilities at those facilities, so they're not captured on here. These are the only facilities where we included in the emergency variance where we'd like to temporarily load oil.
So therefore, Culbert is going to be transported via truck to SMO for pipelining and by Crimson?
We did not load out of Colbert during the emergency variance period, but we did include it as being an option too, because this is at the time where all of the pipelines were affected. So we haven't even installed the loading facility at the Colbert lease.
Or the Mark Richardson Stewart.
But if you were, you have permission to, you're asking for permission to under this, right?
That's correct.
Correct.
And therefore, if you did load it at Colbert and take it to South Mountain, you'd have to go down to Bradley and go through public roads over much longer than
We can make
3
it on
miles.
Lease Road, right? I believe we,
There's two options. You
Yeah.
could go on lease roads up and over and back down, or you could go out onto Bradley and around.
And which one would you take, given the two options? Because going up and over, that's a little bit precarious, it looks like.
More than likely, probably out to the south. But again, we're not intending to load out of Colbert, being that that line is back in service.
so really, maybe if I can impress is, we just want to maintain the flexibility that if something does happen, we have the ability, rather than shut in those leases and essentially lose production, we want to have the ability to do something. And at the time we applied for the emergency variance, that's exactly what was occurring. And as of after filing the short variance, because we had to file it, I think it was like the 15th, a couple of weeks ago, this was all unfolding. So here we are, and we're asking for a short variance, and we would like to maintain the flexibility with this short variance that we have had with the emergency variance. And again, I wish to reiterate, if they were back on tonight, we'd be back in to the pipeline shortly thereafter. It is really in our best interest to be shipping via pipeline, which we have done in the past, and that's what we continue to do.
The potential that during the time of this variance, Crimson the SMO line would shut down again, that's just pure speculation on your part. There hasn't been any indication of that possibility from Crimson?
No, not to my knowledge. Again, we were, with a one-day notice, and then, twice now with what happened with this, and then when they did their all-company safety meeting shutdown. We'd like to maintain the flexibility of keeping this going. And I do believe that in the variance order, the short variance, I believe, has specific language. I believe it's in here that Once the pipeline becomes available, we will resume shipping by pipeline. So that, I believe that, Mr. Searcy, that's a condition of this variance order.
I have some questions.
Sure.
How would you characterize the condition of these roads that you have to use to truck product out of there? I mean, there are dirt roads, some are paved, I've heard.
The majority of them are paved.
And we've been operating these leases with, other truck deliveries and stuff, so.
And do you routinely operate trucks with this kind of gross vehicle weight?
Yes.
We
Vacuum
brought
trucks
rigs
for
up there too.
water
And there-
purposes
And what's
such.
the record? No accidents or?
No.
Not with this. I mean, we've gotten, obviously, there's wells up there, so they've gotten oil rigs up there, which are very large vehicles.
Well, the reason I bring this up is
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of the folks here tonight, people are concerned about the safety issue.
Correct.
What if a truck rolls over and
Correct.
spills oil all over the place? Okay, that's kind of what I figured. I mean, I've been up in this general area before, and I spent a lot of time in the mountains all over Southern California, as I've told you, on mountain bikes and high clearance four-wheel drive vehicles. And some roads are really, really awful in some places. So these are not those type of roads. These are graded and pretty smooth. And
These are pretty good.
why isn't there some kind of coordination between, we have a situation here where one company owns the infrastructure, the pipeline, and another company owns the drilling operation. Is there a state agency that could coordinate things like this so that the county wouldn't have to do it? It doesn't make sense to me that there's no communication. These guys don't even know what kind of progress, if any, Crimson is making. And it does seem to be dragging out.
It is dragging out, and Crimson has not been very forthcoming in trying to communicate what's happening. When we had the first of these variances, 863, I made numerous calls to someone there, and she would go talk to her people, and they would tell her just the bare minimum that they could tell her, and then I would have to ask more questions, and then she'd have to go back to them. It is a problem, and the Crimson is a pipeline company, so they're regulated, I believe, by the PUC as well as I think the state fire marshal has authority over pipelines that do not leave the state. But yeah, it would be nice if there was one agency who could kind of coordinate everything, because at this point they're sort of at the mercy of Crimson. And the only good I can say from this is the fact that Crimson shut down the South Mountain line so they could test it, and if they found any kind of problems, then they could make repairs. And when we have pipelines, it is a good thing to have them making repairs.
Is this the same firm that owned the pipeline where the valve blew out and spilled oil into the Barranca and the Ventura?
Yes. And that could be why they decided to shut everything down, and why that certainly we think that's why they aren't really communicating, because I would imagine that they've lawyered up pretty good.
Did that get the state's attention, the regulatory body that supposedly oversees?
As far as I know, I sat in. I went to a hearing from Das Williams and for Hannabeth Jackson, and Crimson wasn't answering too many questions, even then. So.
But can you invite them over to come over here and go over it? They'll come, or you don't have any, or you have to subpoena them. I don't even know if you have a right for subpoena, can you?
I don't know. The hearing board may legally have the right to. Honestly, I'm not sure.
Well, can we hear from our attorney?
Your hearing board has subpoena power in the health and safety code.
And how does it goes? Do we? Is a majority ask for a subpoena and then it's granted?
Well, it has to be enforced in court if they don't comply, like any subpoena.
because I would like to know the results of this test, when they're going to replace that pipeline, if they can from now on give them more notice to the oil producers, stuff like that. That'd be interesting to get something. If we don't get it from any other source, we should do it here.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, there should be some transparency here. This is serious business.
Mr. Oriano, but if we did do a subpoena, I would assume that if they wanted to resist it, the method that they would, Crimson would resist it on the fact that we don't have any air pollution control power over them. That they don't have a permit with us.
Well, the test would probably be whether they would offer testimony that's relevant to your proceedings that you do have jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But they could fight that in court. There's a whole procedure. It's in Article 3 of the Hearing Board Health and Safety Code revision starting at 40840. But your board does have authority to issue them. And then you normally, if they resist, you end up in court, and they could even be penalized and still not show. So you can try it, but there's no guarantee they'll ever appear.
And as the chair of the Variance Hearing Board, I would ask the district to contact the state regulatory agency that's responsible for overseeing Crimson and other similar pipeline grid owners, and keep us in the loop here. And there should be some teeth. There should be some enforcement. I mean, we've been watching this go back and forth for weeks now, and they don't even know.
I'm not sure what teeth that we have to compel Crimson, other than what, I mean, they're not violating any of our rules by shutting down the pipeline. They aren't. They're causing other people to, and I think that's the problem. Crimson does have a few permitted facilities with us that, they have some tanks and some pits and engines and stuff, but all of the pipelines, that's not something that we regulate. They're underground, and so we don't really have any authority over those pipelines.
What about the Board of Soups? Could they?
I have no idea. I know there are a lot of agencies looking at them, and like I said, I really suspect that they've lawyered up and
Local legislators?
Yeah, I mean, there was a hearing at the Bell Arts factory down on the avenue just a few weeks ago, and and they didn't really, any time any question was asked that had any amount of detail, it was part of an ongoing investigation, so they couldn't comment on it.
Mr. Searcy, didn't you say they are under the jurisdiction of the PUC?
That's what I heard them say at the hearing, and so I think that's one agency, and the state fire marshal, I believe, it's the state fire marshal who has a regulatory authority over intrastate pipelines that don't cross into another state, and none of these pipelines do. So, and that was the agency that allowed them to use the other pipeline, the one that had the leak.
I have some questions of the board. I mean, of the district. I have some questions of the district.
Go.
In looking through the petition, there's a couple of things I think need to be fixed, or at least discussed being fixed. On page 2, on item 4.
Okay, I'm sorry. Are we looking at the petition or the order?
I'm looking at the draft order.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. I don't think that we have any authority to change the petition, but this item 4, I mean, this is just not an accurate statement. They intend to comply with District Rule 71.3. They don't intend to come into compliance with their own permit, which is what this implies.
Okay, so that should.
I think it probably would be okay if it said petitioner intends or will comply with the requirements of District Rule 71.3.
Okay.
page 4 of the draft. I think there's a misstatement here. The very last line above August 2016, shouldn't that be a emergency variance? We could ask the petitioner.
I'm sorry, on page 4?
Page 4,
Where?
the sentence stands all by itself just above August 2016. It says the total expenses for trucking oil during the short variance were estimated in 19,000. I read this and thought that it should say during the emergency variance, but I don't know if that's the right or wrong interpretation.
I would have to look into that. I'm not sure if we can.
Yeah,
Maybe the
it was,
petitioner knows.
it was bigger number than
Sorry?
the costs.
Yeah. Were those for 863? You know? Right. What it says is during the short variance. So do we know if it was during the short variance or?
The short variance, they don't have a short variance yet. That's what
Right,
bothered me about
right.
this.
So then I would say that that's a typo.
Yeah, we had, I'm looking at our original petition application, if I may. We made the calculations, it was described the harm, compliance with the rule. If the emergency variance were to expire and a short variance is not granted, all the production on South Mountain would be shut in. The cost of continued shut-in of approximately 2,000 barrels of oil per day, calculated at $45 a barrel, times 2,000, times 90 days, is approximately $8.1 million.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan, if I could interrupt, that starting with what we're looking at right here, the paragraph starting CRP, and that had two subparagraphs and the sentence there following that. Why is that even relevant to this?
Well, we can all, if
I
it
mean,
needs
that
to be
really
taken out, we
isn't
can take it
relevant
out.
to this,
Right.
right? Just delete it all.
Okay.
I do that all the time.
I borrow my wife's phone.
So on page 7, just a typo down under item 3, paragraph begins with if immediate compliance. On the second line, it said they would have to shut in production.
Yeah.
Yeah, shut in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I told the petitioner, I would like to add that they will minimize truck vehicular emissions on site by minimizing idling.
Okay, I
think
would add that, I believe, beginning on page 9, under shall. They shall,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
there's a list of 12 things. We could add it there.
I would put it as a 13th
Yeah.
item.
Yeah,
We
that's
would-
fine.
We would, I just heard from our engineering, we're trying to get the deals idling, but I'm not convinced by our engineering that we can completely shut the truck off, but we would absolutely minimize the emissions during idling and comply with all the other rules while it's loading.
Okay,
It's also got to be grounded while it's loading as well.
that doesn't
Some-
cause any emissions.
No, I'm just waiting for an engineering
Okay. answer
answer before I commit to turning the truck off. I'd like to keep that
How would
open.
you minimize the emissions if the truck's idling?
We calculated, I mean, that's the reason for our short variance. Yeah. I'm told that we can increase the amount of testing under 7410 if we wanted to do additional on the emissions. What was the other one?
Well, that's not what I was asking for. I was asking if,
If I understand, you're asking us will we shut off the truck during loading?
Yeah.
And I guess my answer is, I don't think I can commit to that due to the nature of the loading operation.
I mean, we're talking about 20 trucks a day and an hour of truck, that's 20 hours of idling. That's a fair amount.
It's not because we don't want to eliminate the emissions, it's because we may need to have the truck on while it's loading, performing that operation. So it's not that we're saying, no, we want to leave it idling for an hour just because we don't want to start it back up. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that may be required for the loading operation.
So you're going to work that out with
We can work
the
out
district?
You would do it if feasible.
if feasible, correct.
Okay. Mr. Searcy,
Thank you.
does the district have a rule covering the on-site vehicular emissions for this kind of operation, for any kind of on-site vehicular emissions? And my understanding is that that is considered as a local source.
We don't regulate motor vehicles.
I've seen EIRs where on-site motor vehicles were classified as local sources.
Stationary.
Stationary, yeah. Yeah, stationary
That's
sources.
the distinction, mobile or stationary,
Yeah.
that they make.
Right. I don't know whether South Coast has such a rule or not. It seems like it is a stationary source. It's the, in any event, I'm kind of disappointed if the district doesn't consider that as a,
We don't have any authority over anything that drives down the road. We do regulate engines that are bolted to a foundation, and we can regulate what we call portable engines, but for any off-road equipment, any on-road equipment, we don't have legal authority to. The only thing that I could point to that might help CRC make a decision is that there is a statewide regulation that talks about diesel idling for trucks, but that also has a number of exemptions that talk about if you need to run the AC because people are sitting in the truck and it's hot and all that kind of thing. So I'd actually have to look at that regulation. I haven't looked at it in quite a while, but there are a certain number of requirements for.
Why does the truck engine have to run while the truck's being loaded? Do you need it powered from the engine to?
I don't think we know if it needs to be or not, so
We're trying to
Why
find
do you
that out.
do it if you don't know?
we don't know if we do. So
Oh, I see, it's not your truck, it's a contract.
it is a contracting truck.
I would
Is that out of our
definitely.
jurisdiction?
We'd be
I
open
would
to-
like to know why the trucks are idling, and if it is,
I mean, I understand why a cement mixer truck the engine has to run because it
If-
turns the, but I don't understand why a tanker truck, the engine would need.
Can
to
I
run
introduce one of our,
When you're filling it up with crude.
okay. I'm going to introduce Mr. Steve Gregg. He's also got an engineering background. And, he's with CRC, and perhaps he could better answer the question.
Because I
I'm not an
agree with
engineer.
Disney And the board, that's a lot.
Yes,
of
correct.
diesel.
I understand.
Let's swear this gentleman in. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good evening, I'm Steve Gregg. Is this on?
There you go.
That's all right. Good evening, Steve Gregg, Director of Government Affairs with California Resources. We are close to positive that we can turn off the truck. But when anybody says we're close to positive, that means we aren't. So the exception would be if for some reason the pumping system to get the crude onto the truck requires that it's using the engine power to run the pump. And that's rare, but that could be the case. So that was all we were trying to control. It was just more of a concern that if we, and I appreciated the language that said if feasible. So if the actual pumping operation doesn't require the truck to be running, then we can turn off the truck. If for some reason the pumping operation requires the truck to be running, then. then we wouldn't. Or if there was some other part of the operation that required the truck engine, then we would.
Is that the only pumping process available? One that requires?
No.
No, it's not, and we could look for other, we could look for other, look for other truck. I mean, again, I guess what I would propose is that we go back to the feasible and let us work with the APCD staff.
I don't think we're allowed to use, the truck's pump, if I'm correct.
If it's a vacuum truck, you aren't allowed to use the truck's engine for the pumping the oil. The reason why is because a vacuum truck pumps oil into the tank, and then it just exhausts whatever else it goes into the air. So there has been a condition on all of the other variances that basically says that they are not allowed to use the engine on a vacuum truck for loading that truck. So unless there's some other reason.
If that's part of the condition, we've agreed to that, then that would make this, then we can, if we've agreed to that, then that would.
Yeah, it goes through the
Then
electric
it's
charge pump,
Okay.
I believe.
So that was the only exception, is if for some reason there was a need. And so when it just came up during the discussion, we were looking at, can we agree to the condition, and our operations folks weren't sure. So, but it sounds like we already have, so we can live with it. Thank you.
Well, the district has no jurisdiction over vehicles, but it does have jurisdiction over stationary
Well,
engines.
and the district has jurisdiction over this permit, because, I mean, this is part of our, because we're applying for a variance, this is within the district jurisdiction.
So could we put language into the order saying that if technically feasible, that the engines will be turned off?
Yeah.
Yes, but
Unless there's
I just.
some overriding reason why it needs to be running?
Yeah, I just want to point to page 9, item number 8, on the draft order. It says, if vacuum trucks are used, CRPC shall not use the pumps on the vacuum trucks to load or unload oil because the pumps will create excess uncontrolled emissions.
Correct.
Oh, so it's in there.
And we've been living
Yeah.
with that. Sorry, I didn't know the answer to
Yeah.
that one.
So that one's been on all of these orders.
And we've been complying. We submitted
Yes.
a weekly report. Sorry, I didn't know that one off the top of my head.
They're
That's
not
my
your
fault.
trucks.
I apologize.
So you're not really in charge of the trucks, right?
Well, but the operation we are.
Yeah.
We
Right.
give them guidance on what they can and can't do.
One of the requirements of the orders has been that they comply with 71.3, and if they use the pumps on the vacuum trucks, they're not going to comply with 71.3.
I'm touchy about this because when I worked at a publishing company in Newbury Park for 30 years, these mom and pop operators would bring their rigs in with pallets of books, and they would sleep overnight the year round, and they'd be driving from Tennessee from our printer, and they'd run their diesel engines, and we'd all get to work in the morning and open up the windows, and we'd say, hey, can you turn off your engine? Well, they said, we have to run our heater or our air conditioner. Until the county said you can only run it for so many minutes after you stop.
Okay.
But these were out-of-staters. So it's noxious and toxic.
Right. Sorry for that.
Does the board have any further questions?
I have one of the district that on page 9 in the now therefore, you've got a November 13th date. How is that date chosen? Because you talk about later that they'll, in 12, that they'll have a regular variance hearing on November 21st. And there seems to be a disconnect between that date and the November 13th date.
That should be the same as the expiration date. That should be the 27th.
Okay.
Typo. I probably looked at this thing 20 times and I didn't catch it.
Terrible to proofread your own stuff, isn't it?
Does the board have any further questions? Does the district have any further questions?
No.
I have some speaker cards from members of the public. In no particular order. Helen Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Stubblefield, and thank you very much to the board. I really appreciated hearing your questions, and we share your concerns. I'm representing an organization here in Ventura County, which is a nonprofit organization, which is called Sea Frog Citizens for Responsible Oil and Gas. And I guess I would like to address what the presenters for CRC said originally. They said that they are concerned with character, responsibility, and community. So I'm glad that they're here to seek a variance from a board who is intelligent enough to ask some really important questions. I do not see how you can possibly make a decision on this matter as a board, if I were sitting up there, because you do not know what the situation is with Crimson. I will tell you that I was at the hearing in Ventura where Senator Hannah Beth Jackson and Doss Williams had the fire marshal, the state fire marshal, who had just flown in. I don't think he really knew quite what was going on. He's in Sacramento. They flew him in. He was kind enough to come. They had the Ventura Fire Department there, and they had the owner of Crimson, who apparently lives in Ventura. And it is very much the case, as the APCD technician here said, that there was very little information, if any, given. In fact, it was stunning to hear, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, who owns the company, state that the spill, the rupture in the pipeline up behind the high school in Ventura, in the Barranca there, the only reason why the company knew about it was that the neighbors called the fire department. And he said, isn't it wonderful that we can count on citizens to help us? And I was thinking, no, no, no. You have many ways to find out about this. And their Long Beach facility should have told them immediately there was a problem on there. But it did not. So I suspect that there are some liability problems here. Crimson may be experiencing some difficulty. You can be sure that some of the citizens who are upset in the Ventura area are probably pursuing some litigation. But that does not excuse the company from participating with CRC now to let them know what they're going to do. Now, to the company, I just have one question, because we have other speakers, and that is, I do appreciate the fact that, excuse me if I'm wrong about this, but I calculate it to be, if it's $8.1 million over 90 days, that would come to approximately $90,000 a day loss the company would experience if they shut down their operations, minus the 3 additional wells, orphaned wells. I don't know about those. But in any case, if they shut those down, they would experience that kind of a serious problem to their bottom line. But they did not report to us what the cost to use the pipeline is. They were quick to tell us what it cost them to operate, but they didn't tell us what it cost to use this pipeline. I'd like to see what it cost CRC to utilize the pipeline. And I'd also like to say that we are aware of, because we have a petroleum engineer that advises us, that that pipeline in Ventura that ruptured was put in 1940. So you need to find out how old this infrastructure is. And thank you very, very much for your questions. I would certainly support your subpoenaing the company to help these people make their decision. And we would support a short variance.
Thank you, Helen. By the way, I heard that that blowout was caused by, there was a new valve installed the day before it blew out. So it sounded to me like it was incorrectly installed, the one that spilled into the Barranca.
Nobody would make a statement to that effect. So I don't feel I can.
Okay, Mr. Bob Poole.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Bob Poole. I'm a Ventura County citizen, a resident here. I also represent the Western States Petroleum Association. CRC is one of our members. Crimson is not. So I'm not here to make any apologies for Crimson. However, I've attended all of the hearings, and the CEO has been actually very forthright and trying to help understand what happened, trying to move forward with that information. I was at the Bell Farms, I was at the Board of Soups, etc. And so it seems to me, the point I want to make about that is it seems to me this is really not about Crimson. The fact that Crimson is trying to do what they're trying to do, and we don't know what that is, but they've shut down the pipeline to try to make sure that the pipeline operates proficiently. Now, you bringing them in here and asking more questions, that's great. But the bottom line is the fact that they're doing what they're doing, it seems to me sufficient enough to support CRC's request this evening. And I would also then offer to you, and I've heard comment about reducing the amount of production. That bothers me as a citizen here. It's not responsible to do that. The reason it's not responsible to do that is California imports over 1 million barrels of oil a day. We use almost 2 million. We import over 1 million. So if you shut down 2,000 barrels, there are emissions that are coming in over super tankers from Saudi Arabia that you're going to experience. So when you have the situation of unintended consequences, you really need to look at this situation in that vein and understand that what you're really getting is something less than what you would be getting if you approve this, and let them truck this oil, this domestic oil, this California oil that is produced under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, regulated by the air districts, and let them produce this oil and get it to market as they can while Crimson fixes this pipeline. It seems to me it's that simple. So thank you for your comments. My comments.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. Sandy Smith. Sandy?
Yep. Need a hip replacement, so it takes a little while to get up. Board members, my name is Sandy Smith, and I also represent a nonprofit in the County of Ventura. I'm board chair for the Ventura County Economic Development Association. I want to point out that responsible oil production has been a vital part of the Ventura County economy for about 100 years. I'm a third-generation resident of the city of Ventura, and like a lot of my homeboy friends and home girlfriends in Ventura, my roots are in oil and ag. On my mom's side, lima bean fields, and on my dad's side, a driller for Tidewater Oil for many, many years. And I want to point out to the representing the city the importance of the oil industry to this county's economy. Industry generates about 12,500 total jobs, direct, indirect, and induced. The industry's total value added to the county's economy is $2.7 billion, or 6.5% of the county's total. And the industry's contribution to labor income in Ventura County is about $740 million, or 3.1% of the county total. And the industry contributes over $121 million in county property taxes. So Californians continue, as Bob pointed out, all of the oil and gas produced in the state is used, and we still have to import approximately twice as much from other states and foreign countries like Saudi Arabia and Iraq to satisfy this demand. While growth in alternative energy sources, which VECITA supports and has members of our board representing alternative energy, will help meet some future demand, the energy we currently need should come from in-state sources that keep the jobs and tax revenues they provide here. VECITA appreciates the APCD's due diligence over this matter to enforce responsible oil and gas operations in the county. We emphasize that CRC has followed exact county and APCD protocols and procedures in crafting this request for the temporary variance. We also note their history of responsible oil and gas production in Ventura County. So VECITA respectfully asks this board focus on the facts and particulars related to this temporary variance request for this as outlined in the petition for the hearing, and the minimal emissions resulting from this variance, as well as the economic impacts if this temporary variance is not granted and production stops on South Mountain. So we urge the board to follow staff's recommendation and grant the petition. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Matt Guthrie.
Good evening, board members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm another in a long line of people representing a Ventura County nonprofit organization. I'm here today representing Ventura County Coalition of Labor, Agriculture, and Business. People recognize it as CoLab, or refer to it as CoLab most often. We represent about 450 members from various industries. The tagline for our organization is a collaboration for sensible regulatory solutions, which is what we like to think that we do, and that's for a lot of different industries. We're no stranger to public testimony. We've come and spoken when we think it's necessary. We see regulatory solutions and things that can solve problems, whether they be temporary or long-term. As far as, and I think somebody brought up earlier the problems with the pipeline, and sometimes it feels kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of a thing. If you leave it and you don't do anything about it, that's a problem, and people throw darts at that all day long, and then when you do, and there's issues with that, things come up, and then you got complaints coming from the same people on the other side. There's been a lot of demand for preventative maintenance to oil pipelines. Now that it's being done, this seems like kind of another way to gum up the works and cause a problem for an important industry and a business here in the county. The fact of the matter is CRC has complied with state and local protocols and procedures, and they're seeking only the only viable alternative right now is to truck this stuff. And as far as environmental considerations go, lack of locally produced oil, and Bob brought this up, doesn't alleviate the environmental concerns. Oil not produced and transported here comes in forms with far greater negative impacts. Also coming from CoLab, many of our members in the agricultural industry, and one of the things that we deal with, and this is something that we've been dealing with a lot lately, is there are regulations that exist within the county that require a lot of our agricultural members to truck their things out of the county, and that's been a problem. And there are limitations on things that they can do here, processes that they can do here locally that require them to send that out. So, they're trucking things out of the county or around the county or on the roads are something that they know full well that is are required by local businesses. This is a temporary common sense solution to an issue that only exists because safety precautions are being taken, and we want to be reasonable and allow CRC to continue to conduct their business here, and we think this is a way to do that. So we urge your support of the variance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greg Sefain, do I have that right, Greg?
Correct.
S-E-F-A-I-N?
Yes. First time, too. Good evening, Board. My name is Greg Sefain, and I represent the Coastal Energy Alliance. And we are a local coalition that works to represent members of the community that work and support all methods of safe energy production. First, I'd like to thank the Board and staff for carefully reviewing this project and application and making sure all the requirements are fulfilled from a state and county level. I think CRC is putting safety and environment first by making sure this pipeline is properly inspected and maintained before further use. And it's been clearly noted by staff that the emissions for such a short-term variance will be absolutely minimal to our community. Safe energy producers like CRC are important to Ventura County, and they should not have to hinder their workforce from continuing their jobs, especially when they have followed the strict regulations put on their industry. Our coalition, our members support this variance, and we hope that the Board will support the variance as well. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. Michael Shapiro.
Good afternoon or evening, Board, councils. Michael Shapiro, I represent Seafrog. We remain a bit puzzled because, with the exception of some of the language called unscheduled maintenance, there appears to be no other specific indication given as to why the pipeline is shut down in the first place. I mean, unscheduled maintenance, to me, is a pretty broad category. Was there corrosion? Were there cracks? I think the public needs to know the specific reason for this. Furthermore, there's been no stated estimate time for when the pipeline is going to be scheduled to be operational again. It seems to be very open-ended. And I think it should be the purview of the board to insist on some kind of deadline, some kind of completion when the pipeline is able to be back online again. CFROG believes that there should be public disclosure about how long any so-called temporary request to truck oil product is going to last instead of using pipeline transport, because temporary, we know, it could be mission creep. Temporary goes on, and before you know it, we have this de facto situation where all the oil is just continually being offloaded by the trucks. And most concerning is the indication that CRC plans to evaluate permitting permanent loading facilities, they've stated, at several leases, other leases, because this would require, it seems to me, a revision of all current permits to then allow for use of trucks in lieu of pipelines. Unless there is a comprehensive public hearing and a thorough environmental review under CEQA guidelines, because this is would be a significant change, we feel that the mere possibility of any permanent trucking of oil product where pipelines are able to serve should be taken off the table for consideration. The current permit restrictions requiring use of pipelines and not allowing use of trucks should remain in place. Any consideration by CRC for permanent loading facilities needs to be off the table for discussion, in our opinion. In fact, CFROG is calling for any permanent exemption to be conditioned by a specific and clear time limit. If that time limit is exceeded, the oil should be shut in till the pipeline is then reopened and available with no further variance given. While the proposed vapor recovery at the tank-to-truck exchange site stated about 90% control appears to be reasonable from an air quality perspective, the public nevertheless needs to know if this also meets requirements for a permanent transfer facility under current VCAPCD permit rules or not. And finally, CFROG is opposed to any proposed variance when an obviously open-end, as I said, open-end time limit for such is requested. We think that this lack of dialogue and information between the pipeline and its major, if only, its only customer, I just don't buy it. I mean, I've been a businessman in my life, and if you're the main customer for another byproduct, the idea that you're not having specific reasons and information of why this shutdown is going on is just not credible. It's just not credible. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, I just want you to be clear, though. The APCD does not have jurisdiction over this pipeline, am I correct?
Yes, I understand that. Yeah,
It's a different agency.
Yes,
and
I know.
yes, there needs to be better coordination between the agencies that do have their respective jurisdiction over these two entities. And this is a glaring example of what happens because that doesn't exist. Right?
Yes, I appreciate that. It's a frustration. Yes, thank you.
It's not open-ended, this is a short variance.
Right. John Brooks.
Yep. Thank you. I guess that's on. I don't know. Is it on?
It's on.
Thank you, Chair Stubblefield and members of the hearing board. I am John Brooks. I am president of Citizens for Responsible Oil and Gas. I live in Oakview. I drive a car. I use oil. I love my people that I know that work in the oil field. So all this, Chamber of Commerce talk that we're always heaped on you guys is not specific to this particular matter that's before your hearing board today. It's the details of this project that we're concerned about. Now, Mr. Stubblefield mentioned that Crimson, APCD does not have power over Crimson. But as your attorney noted, you can subpoena them and make them come here and testify so that you have the information in your heads so you can make a responsible decision. As it stands now, you don't have that information. How can you issue variance based on incomplete information? You don't know the reason for the shutdown. You don't know how long. You don't know if the South Mountain Ojai pipeline is going to be shut down again. In fact, the flexibility that CRC asks for comes with absolutely no disclosure. What's the truck route if South Mountain Ojai shuts down? Then where do the trucks go? Somebody mentioned Bradley Road. This is the first we've even seen of any kind of trucking route. So they're going to use two county roads here. presume it's an oil field, and I don't know that, I kind of doubt there's no people that live out there, so. But if they shut down that pipeline and they have to start trucking through Santa Paula, where do those trucks go? There's been no disclosure of that. Do they go down Bradley, and do they go into the town? Do they go past any schools? Do they go past any industries? Do these 20 trucks a day just put diesel into the lungs of our kids? I mean, these are, you think that's inflammatory, but that's the kind of thing that is required by these agencies to produce this kind of information before you make a decision. Now, obviously, it seems obvious to us that Crimson has found severe deficiencies in its pipeline. Why wouldn't they restart it right away? I mean, you can have them come in, you can subpoena them and have them come in and testify that. I think CRC would be appreciative of that because they don't seem to know, or they say they don't know. Neither the board nor the public was given any detailed information about why the pipelines were shut down, why the unscheduled maintenance. Most disconcerting, we know that there was talk, as Mr. Shapiro mentioned, of permitting permanent loading facilities. Why are they doing that? Do they believe that the pipeline will not be out of order forever? I mean, there seems to be some knowledge there that they know that we don't know as the public. The trucks, will they add accident risk and truck emissions that would not occur with pipelines? We don't know what the trucking route is if the South Mountain Ojai thing is. You cannot give them flexibility if they do not disclose what the trucking route is and what areas of the city of Santa Paula or any other neighborhoods would be impacted by the emissions that they would produce. And I thank you very much for your time.
Good points. Thank you, John. Mr. John Reed.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is John Reed. I'm a California native. I live in Thousand Oaks, Ventura County. I'm a retired oil and gas attorney. You've heard a lot tonight, so I'll be very brief. I've had the opportunity to review the application. I've listened to your questions today, listened to what the applicant had to present. It seems to me that what they've presented is a solution to an issue that they're facing with that enables them to go forward and conduct their business as best they can, reducing emissions as much as possible under the circumstances. One of the things that's important to me is what we do in Ventura County to support the businesses that we have. I worry very much that we're not producing enough jobs for the people that work for companies such as CRC and in other places. And I support you granting them an application that lets them continue on. That means none of their employees, none of their contractors are going to lose their ability to bring their paychecks home to their families. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And that completes the public speaker cards that I have filled up. Does anybody else from the public wish to speak? Ellen?
I just want to make sure that the commissioners all know that the conditional use permit that is granted through the Resource Management Department here in Ventura County precludes this company or any company out there from not using a pipeline. So they're already in conflict with the conditional use permit. How, you can ask the attorney who's here today, how will they possibly address that?
That's why they have to get a variance before they can do it. It's not an open-ended thing. These variances have a specified beginning and ending time, and it's pretty short. I don't think anyone really anticipated it would take this long, am I correct, to inspect the pipeline. It's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month? Close to a month now.
Well, can I speak?
Mr. Carmen?
I think we should have dropped this Crimson project, finding out what we can do with them. We should invite them over. We should invite Crimson to come over and testify, say why it's taking so long, what's the main concern, because it could be a spin hole that they have in the pipes, and they might have to replace sections of pipe, but we don't know exactly what it is.
If they refuse with a pleasant letter, you should subpoena them and then bring them over. I don't think it will go beyond a subpoena because it's a small oil company, and when you're talking of fighting a subpoena, then you have to start hiring attorneys, and you're going to real expenses. And I don't think he's willing to do that, being a small pipeline company.
Thank you, Mr. Carmen. I would make another point to the district. In the years that I've been on the board, which is over a decade, granting emergency variances and other kinds of variances is fairly routine, but this is the first time I've ever been asked as a board member to support a series of variances for which there's no end date, because it's out of the control of the petitioner. So I guess there needs to be some way that we can subpoena them if necessary to get them before this board so we can find out when they're going to wrap this up. Obviously, the members of the public are all saying the same thing in different ways, no matter what side they're on, whether they're for it or against it. Because right now, we're giving them another variance if we grant this variance tonight, but we really don't know, am I correct, whether these guys will wrap it up and be done by the end of this one or not.
Right. If I could answer that question, when we get the communications and we get a meeting with them, we're in contact with Mr. Searcy and his staff. So if granted, we will communicate that, what the information we get from them with Mr. Searcy so that the district is aware of when we get it. If that's helpful.
I'm inclined to have, well, that's good. I'm glad you're going to be preemptive about it, but I think a county attorney should contact these guys and say, since you're operating in this county, I don't know, am I within, does that make sense legally? Because the whole architecture, the whole framework of this variance process is based on good faith, and it's based on getting a deadline and taking care of whatever the repairs are so that somebody can get back into business. And this is open-ended. We don't really know where these guys are at. They haven't communicated with anybody in the district, apparently.
Chair Stubblefield, may I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
This short variance will expire on November 27th. If the problem isn't solved by then, they have to have another hearing if they're going to request a regular variance. You could conditionally approve, your board, that a subpoena be issued in time for that hearing should the problem not be resolved by then. In other words, you could authorize me to issue the subpoena for them to come at the date of any hearing on a regular variance that's necessary. If the pipeline is back in operation, that hearing will never happen.
You're suggesting to condition this variance or the next one?
This one.
No, well, it would be a condition in this variance for the next hearing, if any, because this order specifies when they have to come back if they need a regular variance. It would be part of that process that a subpoena be issued in time in the normal course. And if they go to court, it will never happen within that time frame. But
in the years you were the attorney for the board, did this ever?
No, this has never happened except when we had a contest with Halico, in which case everything in the world happened, including quite a bit of litigation. Yeah. But there's no guarantee they'll ever testify. They could, take the fifth. They could do any number of things. But to the extent you could at least have that in place so that they are subpoenaed and requested. The other alternative would be to have the district council contact them in what you've termed the friendly manner and see if they'll give you some information between now and then.
This condition you're talking about, who would that condition be put upon?
You would have to put a trigger in for when the subpoena should be issued, but you would approve the subpoena now. So should an application for a regular variance be submitted, at the same time our office would be authorized to issue the subpoena in your name.
It would be a board, basically it's a condition that says this is what the board will do, not what the district or what the petitioner would do.
You would be doing it now, but on the condition that it's only issued if it's necessary. You would be approving a subpoena now but only to be issued if needed for the next hearing.
But the condition is for some action to be taken by the board, not by anybody else.
No, you would be taking the action now.
I mean, the proposed action.
You, the board, would be taking the action, the hearing board.
So first comes a friendly letter where you put mention that you will have a subpoena if this thing is not worked out, and see what the response is, and then probably give them a date that this letter should be answered, and then go from there.
I think it would be premature to take any action prior to the expiration of a variance if we got one tonight.
Mr., would the direction to you be made by a separate motion from the order that we're going to approve tonight?
Could be done either.
We can make a motion as a board directing you to issue a subpoena if there is a hearing on November the 27th or whatever. And that would be a separate motion, and we would approve the order as we've amended it so far. And those two actions together would give us what we wanted.
That's certainly possible. That's viable.
Would that, if that action is separate from this variance, if we approve it, does that require another hearing? Or?
No, because you have the power to subpoena for hearings. You would just be directing your counsel as to what to do if the hearing is scheduled.
Okay.
That's be preparing to get witnesses for that hearing.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion. Well,
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion right now that the board directs its attorney to issue a subpoena to Crimson, whatever their official name is, for the hearing on November 21st, 2016, once that hearing is set.
If it's set.
Yeah. If that hearing is set.
I'll second that.
Take a vote?
Okay, let's take a vote.
You don't have to push that.
Yeah, I vote yes.
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 Okay, motion carries 4-0.
I move that we approve the draft, the variance that's described in the draft with the changes that we discussed with the district.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Okay, your variance is granted.
Thank you.
Hopefully this will be the last one.
We hope so.
Thank you, petitioners. Thank you, district.
And I want to thank members of the public for coming in and helping us frame this in a way that will be meaningful, that will have some closure. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, for a company, Crimson, to take such a defensive posture, and basically it sounds like you're planning to dispose pretty much anything, and I would imagine that they're probably potentially vulnerable to legal action, maybe some spill, but also what are obviously some unanticipated repair requirements. Do we know if the company is fiscally healthy enough to be able to?
This board has no authority over those guys at all, and we don't know anything about them.
But it does make the relationship.
They won't even talk to their own customers.
Well, I mean, legal partners.
I would think that actually, Jeff, that you may, that because Crimson you should probably inform them of the potential for that, and say they really don't want information. Guys are saying, and anything that would be maybe enough information for subpoenas.